Hello, this is manic.mercurian with your birth chart reading. This reading will be for Saturday, October 11th, 1986 at 3:30 a.m. in Anaheim, California. And I do hope that if you're still in that area that you are safe with the hurricane and everything. But for anyone else who may be watching this who is interested in getting a reading just like this one or maybe a different kind of reading, you can check out my website for more information. It's manic.mercurian.net or email me at manic.mercurian@gmail.com. I put that information in the description of all my videos. I've been doing that in all my videos for probably a year now or maybe more. So you can get that information there, or I usually link the website at the very end of the video as well. But yeah, I really do appreciate anyone who does get a reading. That's what allows me to continue posting new content. That's what keeps this whole channel going. Okay, but for this reading, for your birth information, this means you have Sun in Libra, Moon. Looks like Moon is at the very end of Capricorn. That would change if your birth time was just a little bit different. You could have Moon in Aquarius. But for this time at 3:30, Sun's in Libra, Moon's in Capricorn at the very last degree, and you have Virgo rising. The first thing I noticed with your chart wasn't having to do with the sun sign or the moon sign or actually any signs. It's more to do with just the placement of all the planets. Even if you're not well versed in astrology, you can see from this chart that almost all the planets are at the very bottom of the chart. It looks like they almost like fell down to the bottom of the circle. Jupiter's really the one only exception, which is in the 7th house. So that means it was setting at the time you were born. All the other planets, though, are, in those bottom several houses. So what most people would say about this is that it means that, because those planets weren't in the sky, they were off somewhere else in the world, so to speak, when you were born. This means that their meanings are they're not necessarily absent from your life. It's just that they're a little bit more vague, a little bit more subdued, more subtle, more nuanced, more intuitive, or having to do with intuition or spirituality. You may have a lot of your personality that's kind of very deep, and others, won't always understand you right off the bat just because you are more, I don't know, you maybe are more private or have a richer inner world. And then on the outside, there may be less activity, less energy going on, if that makes sense. That's how most people would read that. Specifically, if we look at the planets at the very base of the chart, Mercury, Venus, Saturn, Uranus. Mercury and Venus in particular have a lot to do with the inner, their inner planets, so they have to do with the individual personality, how we speak, how we communicate, what we desire, how we go after what we desire, and all of these parts of life for you may be very private, so especially because these planets are in Scorpio, which is kind of private anyway, and very perceptive and very geared toward seeing things that are hidden, and they themselves may communicate in a way that is kind of secretive or private, or may have double meanings, things like that. That's kind of time to wake up. That's kind of how these things would work for you, though. You may be just more geared toward finding hidden meanings, looking at topics that are, occult topics like hidden knowledge, conspiracy theories, things along those lines, like astrology, for example. Information that's counterculture or hidden, misunderstood, there's some kind of darkness to it. All of these things you would be naturally really good at picking up on and, very perceptive with. But I don't want to just gloss over the positions of the sun and moon. Those are definitely still relevant. To me, what's really interesting about those, about your sun and moon signs, is that Sun in Libra is in fall there. So, just as in the Northern Hemisphere you were born at the beginning of fall, Libra is the beginning of fall. Sun is literally in fall there. It's debilitated. So this is probably the most difficult sun sign to have. Not only that, but Moon is in Capricorn. Moon is in detriment in Capricorn. So, it's a similar type of dynamic. Moon is You could kind of say Moon is almost like debilitated in Capricorn, sort of. This is also a very difficult moon sign to have. So combining both of these brings about a lot of the same themes of, you may have had a really challenging upbringing. We'll talk more about that in the next chapter of the reading. But yeah, things may have been very challenging for you. You probably do feel like an outsider. You are different. You're kind of offbeat compared to everyone else. You're on a different page. You're looking at things from a different way. So this can be really great when it comes to, having your own opinions, being an individual thinker. You may have a lot of richness there. I feel like there's a lot of richness in when it comes to, the thoughts, opinions, and even emotions of those that have really strong, debilitated placements like you do. But, the cost of that, the expense of it is that it is objectively more difficult, I think, because you start out life not having these things being very strong within you. So, for example, sun and moon, these have a lot to do with our self-image, our individuality, how we express ourselves. It's our identity, basically. So all of these things for you at a young age, you wouldn't really know how to express. You wouldn't really know who you are or how you feel necessarily. All these things would be kind of like fleeting for you. You wouldn't really have a strong identity necessarily, especially like in relation to other people. You wouldn't really know how you fit in, how to express yourself with other people. And that's both like kind of the downfall and the challenge, as well as the beauty of these placements. Like Sun and Libra, for example, yes, it's difficult that you might not always have like a really strong identity necessarily, but at the same time, your identity is strong in the sense that you can kind of bend and around and conform to any opinion or any, anyone you're listening to. It makes you an excellent listener. That's why Libra, Sun people are excellent listeners, because they have that flexibility to their ego, so to speak, to kind of, fit into whatever they're dealing with. They can, they're chameleons. They can fit in with whoever they're around. So some would say that makes your individuality, ego, self-image weaker, but in a different way, you could view it as being stronger in the sense that you have the strength to like conform and adapt to anything. It depends on how you look at it. Same with Moon and Capricorn. Moon and Capricorn would make you very independent. You grew up in an environment that was not very nurturing. It was difficult. You just had to do things on your own. You had to do things yourself. So, you grow up kind of supporting yourself, not only materialistically, taking care of your physical needs, but also emotionally as well. For you, it's very simple. When you have a problem, you fix it. You deal with it on your own. It's easier for you not to involve other people. Now, this is combined with Libra Sun. So on the other hand, you are interested in people. You like having, deep conversations. You do want to involve yourself with other people on some level. But at the same time, a lot of this may be kind of superficial, because when it comes to actually like deeply involving yourself with someone, that you can be a lot more hesitant about, because combining Moon and Capricorn with your Scorpio placements like Mercury and Venus, all of this would come together to me to indicate someone who is very private, very guarded, is not comfortable being emotionally vulnerable. You may have deep feelings at times, but you tend to keep these things to yourself. It takes you a lot of time to trust someone. It's really important for you with all of your interpersonal relationships that whoever you're dealing with is consistent, they're reliable, they are trustable, because you yourself are very loyal. You're looking for that in another person. And coming back to this whole independence thing, you are just very independent. You know how to take care of yourself. You know how to deal with things on your own. And so, why involve yourself with someone when you already can take care of yourself? You know what I mean? This person's going to have to be really, really loyal, really mature, so you can count on them in order to pique your interest, considering that you can take care of yourself. Okay, so, and I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. I really mean any kind of like friendship at all. Judging by your chart so far, it looks like you're kind of a loner. especially early in life as well. I think these things do tend to evolve, especially when you have, detriment, debilitating placements like this. These things start out very challenging early in life, but they can be developed. They tend to get easier over time. And, you do, of course, have free will, so you don't necessarily have to be a loner. But to me, it looks like that's kind of the trajectory as suggested by your chart. You also have Virgo rising. We could talk about that a little bit. So I find that Virgo risings tend to, so the rising has to do with, how you initiate something. It's all about beginnings, and it's about appearances to some extent, but it also has to do with your kind of purpose in life. So with all these things, I find that Virgo rising tends to initiate in a kind of subdued way, or they don't start things like super head on, super fiery. They tend to initiate kind of slowly, gradually. Virgo is a very steady energy. It doesn't, it wants to develop things, but it wants to do so in a very stable way, kind of a consistent, thorough type of way. So that would be kind of your approach to things in general. This would be strengthened as well by your Capricorn moon. These earthy placements show that stability is very important to you. You don't want to, you don't want to rock the boat. You don't want like waves. That's what I'm picturing. I don't know how well that works as an analogy, but you want to build, and you want to continually grow and change, but in a way that's very stable, very thorough. You are kind of slow to change. So that's what's suggested by your Virgo rising. So I find that they tend to initiate socially as well as in their lives. They tend to go about things kind of slowly at first, but then they do open up pretty quickly after that. And usually there's some kind of humor there. There's like a pretty sharp sense of humor, because Virgo rising is really great when it comes to observing like subtle details, and considering your other placements as well, your Libra sun, your Scorpio placements. These would all combine with Virgo rising to show that you're very sharp. You tend to notice like very small details that other people don't. So you can use that for a really great sense of humor. And then Capricorn moon as well. Capricorn placements tend to have a really dry, sharp sense of humor that kind of develops over time. That's usually what happens with that. So yeah, kind of interesting. It looks like you could be a loner. You could be kind of, on your own, very individualistic, very self-supporting. Maybe, you might come across a bit serious or rigid at times, but at the same time, you might have this really great sense of humor that could be very sharp or kind of dry or dark in nature. So that's kind of interesting. And what else? It is interesting you have not only Sun in Libra, but South Node conjunct the Sun in Libra. That would indicate, especially at a young age, you probably were kind of a wallflower. You were, very observant, not so much inclined to be an active part of whatever was going on. You'd rather just kind of sit on the sidelines and just kind of soak everything in. We'll talk about that later as well. Mars in Aquarius, I'll just do like a brief shout out about that before we get into the next chapter of the reading. Mars in Aquarius tends to really, it's very important to you how you are viewed by your community. So, for example, like Mars typically represents our individual ambitions. It's what we personally want. It doesn't typically have to do with what anybody else wants. It's what we want. It's selfish. It's individualistic. For you, though, it's a little bit backward. Mars is in Aquarius, which has everything to do with, yes, it can be rebellious, it can be individualistic. However, what I find actually more often is that Aquarius has to do with the community, the group. It's focused on how it fits in with everybody else. It's constantly looking at, okay, I'm doing this, what is everyone else doing? So having your Mars there, that means that when it comes to your drive, your ambitions, your individuality, yes, you can be very individualistic. You can definitely do your own thing. You can be maybe a bit of a loner, but at the same time, you're constantly checking in. You care about your image and your reputation. You're constantly checking in with, what are my like peers doing, what are my neighbors doing, what are people in my community doing. So that's kind of interesting. It is a bit backward, a bit challenging, but Mars in Aquarius can be really excellent when it comes to fighting for ideals or values, information, things like that are a little bit ethereal and abstract, but they still are, definitely kind of tangible at the same time. They're definitely important in our lives. Fighting for ideals, fighting for information, fighting for the justice of groups, fighting for groups, fighting against groups, but also fighting for groups. There may be this kind of push and pull of, you want to rebel and do your own thing, screw the community. I want to do my own thing. They don't know anything. But at the same time, you're also like their opinions matter to you. You want to fit in, but you want to rebel at the same time. So I don't know. I'm just going to leave it at that. Wherever Mars is, we tend to fight for that, but also fight against it at the same time. So in this case, it's the community. You're fighting for the community. You would defend your community. You want to be a part of the community, yet at the same time, you want to fight against it and rebel. So I'm not exactly sure how that works, but I'll just put that out there. Okay, next is this. I'm still struggling with like a name. This is kind of your karma that we're going to talk about in this chapter. So we're going to talk about past life karma, I guess you could say, past life experiences, and then we bring that into this life. So how do these past life experiences and themes translate when it comes to your innate abilities, innate strengths, as well as some innate challenges as well? And then from there, we're going to talk about your upbringing, childhood, and then where are you going with these challenges, with these strengths? How can you use those? And then what is the trajectory like? What is the potential here? Because there's a lot of potential that's set up between not only the strengths that you come into with this life, but I would say even more with those areas of challenges early on. Those are actually huge areas of potential. Okay, so starting out with the past life experiences, past life themes. For much of this, we can look to the South Node, and South Node is never depicted on these charts that I use, but you can still see where they're at because North Node here is at 20 degrees Aries in the 8th house. South Node is always exactly opposite that. So your South Node is at 20 degrees Libra in the 2nd house, and it's conjunct to the Sun. So what does this mean? Okay, so South Node in Libra, specifically 2nd house Libra. Okay, this means that in a past life, you weren't individualistic, which is kind of interesting because we've already talked about the rest of your chart and how like you do your own thing. You've got some like really strong opinions. You have your own way of doing things, you know, that may be different from the rest. But yeah, what's very curious is that in a past life or maybe multiple past lives, you weren't like this at all. Whatever your job was or your role, it had everything to do with somebody else. So it didn't matter what you thought or what you wanted. It didn't matter what your opinions were. You basically dedicated your life. You gave your life to someone else. So you may have been like a caretaker. Maybe you were a spouse that had to completely just, you know, like maybe you had to serve your spouse in some kind of way. Maybe you were like a consultant or something where you just had to completely serve someone else, completely, you know, like your identity was basically a part of their identity. You were like a moon orbiting around, you know, someone else. You were a planet orbiting someone else. They were your sun, so to speak. So okay, so what do we make of that? So from that, you know, and I don't have specifics. I can only see the themes. I don't know how that, you know, like when it comes to like what kind of job did you have, you know, how did it actually look physically? That I don't know. I do know that with South Node being in the 2nd house, that means that in kind of a backward way, you had to be very independent. So because you were constantly focused on someone else, constantly serving someone else, helping them, informing them, taking care of them, whatever the case was, you know, there was no one to take care of you. So in a weird kind of backward way, you were completely taking care of yourself. You know, no one was there to take care of your needs. You were the one that was the caretaker. You were the nurse, doctor, consultant, spouse, whatever it was. Maybe a combination, I don't know, but you constantly had to take care of someone else. It could have been multiple people too, but it was always like one at a time. So either you had to take care of like one person your whole life, or maybe it was multiple people and but it was always one at a time. So kind of like a nurse, maybe something like that, or it could have been a lot of things really. But whatever it was, you were constantly, working with one person, taking care of them, completely fixated on them. What are their needs? What do they need right now? And again, this could have been in multiple different ways. It could have been on a physical level, like tuning into someone like medically, going, okay, what do they need? Or it could have been much different. Could have been, again, you may have been a consultant where you're looking at a business or an empire, going, okay, what do they need? Like on a more informational level, you are the expert, you're the helper, something like that. But whatever it was, you were constantly giving everything to whoever you were dealing with, helping them, supporting them, building them up. And, again, the weird dynamic is no one was there to build you up. You took care of yourself. So it's this really weird combination of, on the one hand, you're building or feeding into this kind of codependence where, I guess someone's codependent on you. However, I think these things tend to go both ways. Maybe you, on some level, you needed to just, maybe you didn't feel strong enough to stand on your own 2 feet and, have your own image, have your own reputation. You, for some reason, felt more comfortable or more drawn into this life where you're constantly giving everything to one other person. So maybe it was codependent in both ways. That's what I'm getting at. However, again, at the same time, this resulted in you basically taking care of yourself. No one was helping you. You're always helping the other person. Okay, so what do we make of this? So when it comes to coming into this life from having had that experience, now it's beginning to make more sense to me, I think, because that's where, even though it may seem backward, I think that's how you come into this life, just taking care of yourself. That's what you've known in past lives, and that's what your experience as a child has kind of pushed you to as well. It's almost kind of sad, really. Like, no one takes care of you. You just take care of yourself, However, I do think this is really strong. It's very powerful because, you are independent. This is something I talked about in a recent reading as well, that, many of us could be a little bit more like you. I do think it's admirable in some ways, to be self-sufficient, to take care of yourself. If you don't like something, fix it. It's like old school practicality, old school way of doing things, I guess. Take care of yourself, whatever. There's huge strength to that. There's a huge strength there, for sure. And with South Node in Libra, going back to this whole like caretaker situation, coming to this life from that, there are a lot of strengths there as well. So especially when it comes to understanding other people, observing other people. And it's really interesting because your other placements that we've talked about in your chart indicate that as well, that you have huge strengths when it comes to being very perceptive, very intuitive. A lot of that intuition may come from that caregiver role. Whenever you are so influenced by another person, I think it does boost your intuition because you have to constantly be like attuned to them. Like, what are they feeling? What is their mood? What happened with them? It boosts the empathy, but again, deeper than that, it boosts the intuition and the perceptiveness as well. I'm not saying that's always a good thing. A lot of times that can be pretty rough and dysfunctional, but that's just the truth. So as best I see it. That's very interesting. From that past life experience as a caregiver in some kind of fashion, you come into this life on the one hand being very independent, and for the second, being very perceptive, very intuitive. You can read other people very well. You can perceive motives and intentions. You can see kind of everything. It's like you have x-ray vision. People often say those with Scorpio placements have x-ray vision. So lots of huge strengths there for sure. And where I'm kind of getting at is this is your comfort zone. It is your comfort zone in this life to just continue what you already know from past lives. So to continue to be very independent, and you may be very giving as well. You may be giving in the sense that you can kind of, you are Libra, you can kind of go with the flow and feed into whatever people want from you, whatever they expect. You can kind of just go along with that, give them what they want, and then continue. I think in a way this could be very isolating for you, and that's your comfort zone. Stay isolated, don't get like too involved with anyone, and just kind of do your own thing, take care of yourself. That would be easy, but this is not going to be rewarding for you in this life. This will actually lead to your downfall, because it's not fruitful. What's the point of doing all that when your soul has already done that in past lives? You've already mastered these types of things. So there's always a balance of using our strengths that we come in with. These are huge strengths. They would be wasted if they were not used at all. But to completely just focus on them and not anything else, that would be a waste as well, because like I said, you wouldn't be really learning a whole lot. You're just using, you're just doing what you're already good at. So to go more into your kind of development and more go into what you're not as good at, we can look to the opposite side of the chart, North Node in 8th house Aries. So this is kind of interesting. This is a lot more intense. This is saying, when it comes to actually, it's weird because these things are kind of conflicting too. So on the one hand, it's about being assertive, being more individualistic in the sense of, if someone asks your opinion, you're just totally honest with them, totally say exactly what you think, rather than like conforming to the situation, conforming to the context of the question or of the, whatever's going on, conforming. You seem like you'd be very excellent when it comes to conforming to, different kinds of people from different walks of life, fitting into their narrative. That's really great. But what North Node in 8th house Aries is suggesting is, try not doing that. Try just being, obviously use some of your own discernment. We can't just go around like telling people off and stuff like that. We have to be diplomatic at times, but try having the pendulum swing a little bit in the other direction and being a little more transparent, more blunt, more forthright, more like Aries kind of. That's how Aries is. And in kind of a backward way, this can be very captivating as well. You can be very captivating with what you're already doing when it comes to like just being what other people want. However, if you swing the pendulum the other way, this can be captivating too when it comes to, being your raw, authentic self. Others like that. They respond to that. Others, it can be polarizing at times, but I think, as different as everyone is, we all just want like the truth, or we at least think that we want the truth. So when we come across someone that is very like free-spirited, very strong-willed, that's very powerful, I think. So maybe like try doing that. And you may have already tried all this, everything I'm saying right now, you may already know a lot of this. You may have already grown a lot in these areas. So I always say I'm not trying to lecture you. You probably have developed a lot in these areas already. But that's kind of the trajectory, that you'd start out being more of a wallflower, very independent, maybe more of a caregiver. The trajectory is, going in the direction of standing on your own 2 feet, having your own identity, having your own opinion. And again, it does look like you have some really rich, unique opinions, unique viewpoints, unique ways of going about things. So let that stand out. Yes, it will be polarizing, but it's very powerful, I think. And what I'm getting at is North Node in Aries. Yes, that does have to do with being assertive, doing your own thing, being kind of a rebel, having your own identity. Yet at the same time, this is actually what's required to have really strong, really intimate relationships. Not just romantic, but like really deep friendships as well, deep relationships in general, any kind of relationship. And that's where the 8th house comes in. Yes, North Node is in Aries, being assertive, being individualistic, but it's also in the 8th house. So it's saying, being individualistic, being transparent, that's what's required to have these really authentic relationships. How can anyone truly connect with you on a deep level if you're always just kind of fitting into whatever they want, whatever they expect from you? you may feel that you can do these things and still be authentic, but is that authentic though? I mean, it gets kind of blurry or confusing with Libra, I think, because they are so flexible. They can kind of fit in with what other people want. And on some level, they are being authentic. That is kind of part of themselves. But if you're kind of like bending yourself and you're bending the truth, sort of, is that as authentic as it would be to just be like, blunt and forthright? I think from an early age, you may not even know how to represent yourself in that type of way because it is foreign. The learning or the growth will be slow at first. But I think if you do experiment with being a little bit more assertive or blunt, it will be maybe difficult or uncomfortable at first, but the more you do that, the more you may have success there. You may have abundance. That's what the North Node typically brings. That's what it indicates. Okay, so we talked about one major dynamic there when it comes to your past lives and your challenges and then where you're going in life. Let's talk about Saturn as well. So Saturn is in Sagittarius. It's at the very bottom of the chart, conjunct the IC in the 4th house. So, okay, that's kind of a weird one. So Saturn in Sagittarius would imply from a young age you wouldn't want to like experience other worlds, like anything that has to do with the expansion of your soul, the expansion of your mind. So like long distance travel, trying something completely new, going on some grand adventure. What else? Exposing yourself to completely different philosophies or ideas or like world beliefs about how the world works. All of these things that have the potential to completely expand your mind, expand your consciousness, would be very uncomfortable for you at a younger age. You may not have the opportunities to travel or try new things on that kind of level at a young age. What else? But although you may feel kind of oddly hesitant or like skeptical about all these types of activities or experiences, over time these things do tend to get easier. You may become more open to these things as you kind of mature, and especially you've already experienced your Saturn return. Usually in our late 20s we go through the first Saturn return, and this is typically an experience where we kind of deal with our Saturn. So for you, in your late 20s, you may have kind of confronted yourself, and maybe you did have an opportunity to travel very far or learn something completely new. Maybe your world views changed in some kind of way. Something involving the dramatic expansion of your soul, your mind, your soul. You may have had, some kind of really grand experience that, because these things are where we get wisdom from, basically. That's what this is about. Wisdom that comes from either knowledge or from some kind of grand experiences. So whatever it was, you may have felt kind of stuck, like you couldn't experience these things early in life, but over time these things get easier. You tend to embrace these things more, especially during and after the Saturn return. You may have been confronted with these things in some kind of way in your late 20s, and then going forward, this would have been like 6 years ago or something. I'm not really sure. But since then, you may have felt that you are a little bit more open. That's usually the trajectory. Again, you have free will, but that's usually what happens. Going into our 30s, we become more open to these types of things, more mature with these things. And then later in life, you have the potential to actually be a leader with these types of things. Being a leader with, it's hard to say what it is. It's hard to pin down themes that have to do with Sagittarius because it could be a lot of different things. You could be a leader in the sense that you could be like a teacher, professor, someone who deals with spirituality or religion, philosophy, higher learning, metaphysics. What else? Or something having to do with like travel, physical travel. Not really sure. But something involving helping other people expand their consciousness, giving other people wisdom or helping other people find wisdom themselves, things along those lines. So exactly how you go about that, I'm not really sure, but that's where the potential is for you with Saturn in Sagittarius. What's interesting though is that Saturn is at the bottom of the chart, conjunct the IC in the 4th house. That means that this is really weird. Honestly, I'm not sure how to combine these exactly, but I will say this means that on the one hand, the challenge was what I just said. The challenge was with travel or expansion, adventures, but at the same time, the challenge was with your home life. It was with your family. With Saturn in that area, you may have felt like you never truly had a family, in the sense that you never had like a place where you could just come home. It never really felt like home to you. It never felt like you could be emotionally vulnerable and just, let your guard down. That's, I think, ideally what a home and a family are supposed to be. And so in that sense, you may have felt like you never really had those things. You never had a home or a family. So that is really rough. That's one of the most difficult, places for Saturn to be, I think, because that is so personal and private. And this is in many ways, this is like the most sensitive, most softest, most vulnerable part of the chart. So having Saturn there, like challenging you, and especially from a young age, not having these things, that is pretty rough and it's pretty sad. But you have this task or challenge of creating these things for yourself. And from that, this takes a lot of time. It can be hard. It's not always fair. But from that, there is the potential for you to create something really beautiful. So you could be actually a leader when it comes to your home life, your family. You could create your own sense of home, your own family. And again, exactly how that works, I'm not really sure. But maybe just either literally creating like a nuclear family, or just like bringing in close friends. Whatever your home situation is, I don't know, but that's kind of your task. And again, this is one of those things that will be easier going into your 30s as you're more mature, you're an adult. But early on is when that's the most challenging, basically. And somehow those two tie in together. Those two, what I mean by that is, being challenged with experience, adventuring, worldviews, wisdom, metaphysics, that has something to do with the challenges of your home life as well. So that doesn't really make sense to me, but I'm just going to put it out there because maybe it makes more sense to you. How, those themes they are usually very different, because usually adventure and, traveling has nothing to do with being at home. But for you, those two things maybe put that out there. Okay, so we talked a lot about your challenges, what you're learning in this life. Let's talk quick before we go on to the next chapter. So for one, going back to the South Node at second house Libra, that points to you being a wallflower as a kid. Usually when you have South Node in Libra and North Node in Aries, you start out life kind of shy, withdrawn, introverted. You are a kid that likes doing things with your hands, so reading, writing, drawing, playing with toys. These things are all kind of passive in nature, really. So that would be kind of your jam as a kid, doing things that are creative or passive in nature. And being, again, kind of a wallflower, you're kind of just observing everyone, This builds the foundation for, I think, being very intelligent, very perceptive, but not as skilled or confident when it comes to directly interacting with people or things. However, you do have North Node in Aries, so that is, this shows that you have that potential for being much more outgoing later in life. It's just that you start out kind of shy and withdrawn. But and again, that's not always the case, but typically that's how it goes with these nodal placements. Later in life, you will increasingly become more outgoing, more involved, more directly, physically involved with people and situations, rather than just being a wallflower. But what's really great about this is that you still have that wisdom, that intelligence, that perceptiveness that you built from being a wallflower at a young age. It's just that, using that when you are becoming more involved, influential, later in life, I think that can be very powerful. So it's kind of like the dynamic of being an outgoing introvert. You still have the foundations of being, you're still operating kind of like an introvert would, but you're just being more outgoing, more involved than an introvert would typically be. So that's one way of looking at it. So South Node, we're talking about your upbringing. South Node in second house Libra, independent child, passive child, quiet, observant, intelligent. That's kind of how that would typically go. We can also look to the IC to get information about your childhood. That would be that little black triangle at the base of the chart. It's right on the Scorpio-Sagittarius cusp. It's technically at 1 degree Sagittarius. So that would point to your childhood being full of different experiences, different knowledge. There were different people who from different walks of life. So you may have been around like adults at a young age who, again, they had completely different cultures, different beliefs, different habits, different cultures is a good way to put it, because they had different lifestyles, different viewpoints on things. So there's a lot of contrast there. There's a lot of different experiences that you had, at a young age with all of this. So this is really great for, just knowing from a very young age that, there's such a range to human experience and human knowledge, human lifestyles, things like that. You grow up being very aware of all of these things. You've experienced that at a young age. And, this is another one of those things that has two sides to it. So starting out life, having all these experiences, this is what's going to make you an expert. It sets up the basis for you being really great at either delivering like knowledge and information at an older age, or doing some kind of career involving like being around many different kinds of people, delivering information, something like that. And that's your midheaven in Gemini. That's the opposite side of the IC in Sagittarius. So yeah, really interesting. Kind of an introverted kid, yet at the same time, like you were learning so much from people, maybe, or learning from different experiences. I would think that IC in Sagittarius would mean that you moved very far as a child or traveled a lot as a child. I don't always find that that's actually the case, though. You may have been in one place, but you were just learning about the world, learning about different lifestyles or cultures from the people you were around, something like that. Okay, and then let's see if I can see a little bit about your parents. It's kind of weird how astrology, by looking at one person's chart, you can see about other people in their lives. For you, sun and moon are roughly squaring one another. That would indicate your parents were very different from each other. And that's interesting. Sun and moon are either in fall or detriment. So that would indicate both your parents weren't like typical. They weren't like, your father didn't fit the role of a traditional father, and your mother didn't fit the role of a traditional mother, if that makes sense. They were kind of, unusual, eccentric, like different than the norm. And they were very different from each other. Sun and moon squaring, they may have butted heads a lot. There's usually the potential for a lot of like fighting potentially. Or just, they just weren't, I would think the main trajectory would be that they weren't compatible. They're just so different from each other. They had different viewpoints, different ways of going about things. They probably had different parenting styles as well. So that's very confusing for you as a child. It brings a lot of contrast, a lot of inconsistency. That is more difficult. It's a more difficult route to go on. I think that can mean that it may take time for you to have confidence when it comes to dealing with other people. Yet at the same time, it is powerful in the sense that this means that you naturally are great when it comes to holding completely different viewpoints in your head at the same time. This is something that you learned from those experiences. Excuse me. Okay, so this is great for two main things as I see it. It's great when it comes to learning abstract concepts. If you want to really learn about metaphysics, learn about complex ideas, this is kind of the better way to go about it. Also, when it comes to having empathy, you are great with listening to someone. Even if you disagree with them, you can hear them. You can see things from their point of view. Okay, so that all that comes from your parents being very different from one another, or whoever was raising you, whoever you were around. Speaking of that, it's really interesting because Saturn is direct, so that would indicate your father being very present in your life. However, Saturn's also in the 4th house, which would indicate that would usually indicate your father not being around as much. So both can be true. I'm not sure exactly how both would be true. Maybe your father was only around sometimes, but when he was around, he was like very present, very involved with you, or something like that. Maybe he was always there, but he wasn't like mentally there. And I'm not saying that as a joke. I really, some kind of combination. Both can be true somehow. What else? And it's weird because both the sun and the moon, they're kind of near the bottom of the chart. Neither one is really aspecting the ascendant, so that would indicate, both your parents may have been there, but they didn't. Like, it's like they don't fully understand you or fully know you. Maybe. All of this is speculation, of course, but that's kind of what I would speculate based on those placements. Okay, going into your career. This is something you specifically asked about. So, hopefully I can... Okay, good. I didn't want to show any of your personal information, but I just wanted to bring up this email so I could read it again. So, I know you can't see all of this, but I'm just going to use this for myself. You said, I want to know who I am in general, but I'm looking for some career and relationship advice. You say you were in an 11-year relationship with another Libra Sun and Venus Scorpio. You've been 2 years single. You're not really over it. So we'll talk more about that in the next chapter. But you also say you've been at the same job for 13 years as a courier, and you want to do something else. Anything where you're out and about, you want advice in this area. So I do want to say that's really interesting to me that both the relationship and the career seem to take up the same time frame roughly. Because if you're in a relationship 11 years and then you were single 2 years, that means that whole time frame is 13 years, and then same with your job was 13 years. So let's kind of just go on a tangent, and because this, although it does have to do with the career, this whole 13-year time frame kind of launches me into this other trajectory, but that's okay. 13 years. So that makes me think of, what could kind of be fitting a 13-year time frame. I don't know if that's the best way to go about this, but that's definitely one way we could look at it. And so what? That would be 2010. I know there are Saturn cycles. Saturn tends to, we of course have our Saturn return after about 29 years, roughly 29 and a half. But every 7 years, Saturn squares or opposes our natal Saturn or conjoins it. So ages 7, 14, 15, 21, 22, 29, these are all kind of difficult ages. Every 7 years, there's some kind of crisis or confrontation, something involving us, having to grow up in some kind of way. It could be that. I don't know. Let's go back to your career. Okay, so you've been, pretty stable with your job, but you want to do something else though. So, and you don't really say why you want to do something else, but So, okay, so one thing that I kind of touched on a little bit, Gemini midheaven, um, Gemini midheaven, Gemini energies in general, they get bored easily. They want a little bit of everything. They like being kind of scattered. So it makes sense that you would be a courier. When you say courier, that makes me think of like a package deliverer. I don't know if that's what you mean by that. But with that kind of job, you're kind of everywhere. You're constantly, there's a lot of short distance travel around the neighborhood or part of the city that you're in. You are briefly interacting with many different people throughout the day. So that would, that is really, that really hits the nail on the head when it comes to Gemini midheaven. You're dealing with lots of little tidbits of information, and then taking them from one person and then giving them to other people. Same with like if it is packages or pieces of mail or what have you. You're taking little objects just like you would take little bits of information and give them to someone else. You're taking little objects, little boxes or whatever, and then traveling around, bringing them to someone else. You're kind of like a honeybee. That's Gemini midheaven. So if you are a courier, package deliverer, whatever, that would fit that really well. That doesn't necessarily mean that like that's the only job that you can have. There are many different ways that theme could play out. That's definitely one, but I often say, with Gemini midheaven, could also be teacher, journalist. Usually it's more having to do with information, but again, it could definitely have just to do with like delivering goods or services like around the neighborhood, like traveling around. That definitely would fit that as well. Going back to your strengths though too, you're very independent. We talked about that, but ideally, I would want something for you that isn't just totally independent. I know I used to be a mail carrier for 2 years. I know that could be very isolating. Like, depending on, I don't think it's always isolating, but for me it was, being in neighborhoods all day, no one's at home really. There'd be a couple people on the route that you could talk to, but for the most part, you're kind of just on your own, walking around all day. So depending on your specific job, it could be kind of isolating. And that comes back to, you are very independent. You're probably comfortable on your own to some extent. Yet at the same time, this isn't going to truly be good for you. It's not going to help you grow. So for you, speculating based on your chart, I would look for a job that maybe there is some level of independence in it, but at the same time, you can be around other people or cooperate with people on some level, because I think that would actually be better for you. It would help you grow kind of more so. I think if it was completely involved in interacting with other people all day, I think that would be a little too much, but I think some kind of balance would really be nice for you. And then looking at your other strengths, you're very perceptive. Looks like you're very intelligent, especially when it comes to really truly having your own opinion on things, your own take on things. Really seeking the truth rather than just going along with, I Googled it and I just went with the first search result. You really want to understand things on a deep level. It's not good enough for you. Like, let's say let's say there's a consensus, there's a mainstream answer, there's a mainstream narrative. For you, that wouldn't be good enough. You want to really understand, is that actually the truth, or is there something deeper going on? Things like that. So, you don't necessarily have to use that for your job, but these are strengths that I think could be utilized. That would make me think more of like a teacher, professor, journalist or something. Something having to do with delivering information. Midheavens in Gemini, we talked about that a lot. Lots of activity, bored easily. Lots of short distance travel or short interactions with others are really great for you. It's kind of like the god Mercury. Mercury in the Greek plays was said to never really be the main character. He was rarely the main character, so not a lot of like drama going on with Mercury, but he had the most lines, in the plays because he, was talking to the most people. Like, he may have had very short what do you call it? Like, he may have only been on stage for short amounts of time, but he was constantly, coming in, conveying messages, talking to this person, talking to that person. That's kind of the role that you would play with your career. You're not like, you're not maybe like you could be a business owner. I think anyone could, but I'm just saying you're not like the CEO. You're not the hotshot like celebrity. You're not the DJ or whatever. You're not the center of attention necessarily, but you're just someone who's constantly like involved with many different people, many different situations, passing on information and then going on your way. Kind of. That's how I see it. So again, a delivery person or it could be something more informational though. And I don't know, the informational route might be interesting because that would be kind of something deeper maybe, and you look like a kind of deep person, so maybe that would be more fulfilling in a way. I'm not sure. Excuse me. Otherwise, Gemini midheaven, it's ruled by Mercury. Your Mercury is in third house Scorpio. So yeah, that pretty much just confirms what I was already saying. Mercury, that's interesting. So the planet ruling over, so midheaven is the most public part of your chart. It's at the top of the sky. But the planet ruling that is down near the bottom in third house Scorpio. So that would point to, okay, this might get kind of deep, and I'm kind of going out on a limb here, but I think for your public role, it's something involving like bringing something out of the darkness into the light. That would be maybe a role that you could take. Bringing out, like shedding light on some unusual or dark information. It's something to do with how perceptive you are. You're so intuitive, so perceptive. Maybe you use that in your job somehow. You can really, perceive a lot of depth and really like cut through things with your X-ray vision. How can you use that for a career? Maybe something with information, teaching. I'm not sure exactly. Maybe you would know. Also, what's interesting is you have Lilith near the midheaven. Lilith is this kind of dark, ruthless, untamable, like divine feminine energy. I would say it's divine feminine, but we usually think of the feminine energy traditionally as being like very composed and sweet. There's also a feminine energy that's like totally wild and just ruthless. What do you say? It answers to no one. You know what I mean? We have that energy. We all have that energy somewhere in our charts, somewhere in our experience, in our lives. For you, though, it's interesting that it's at the top of the charts. This in itself is kind of a dark energy, not in the sense that it's bad or evil. It's just kind of dark. It's typically a dark energy, but it's also at the top of your chart. So not only is this darkness and depth and wildness in the midheaven ruler in Mercury in third house Scorpio, but also Lilith. So that's a really interesting comment. It's honestly kind of challenging for me to interpret. So for your career, for your role, you want to do something, moving around, but you don't want to be controlled. You want to be totally wild, but at the same time, I think something where you're conveying really deep information, or really changing or transforming things on a deep level. Something where you're around maybe some level of crisis could be very useful to you. So that brings my mind in two different directions. One would be either like teacher, professor, journalist, someone conveying deep information, really changing people's minds. On the other hand, though, you could be something, being around critical situations, being a like psychiatrist or investigator, or something where you may be around people that are panicking. They are at their most extremes, and you are not only remaining calm, but using your excellent perceptive abilities to help them, to help them change, to help I don't know, to be like a paramedic or something. Paramedic. Um, I don't know, but I'm gonna go back to the themes though, because that's truly what I can see, and then I'll just let you do whatever with them, because maybe you can make sense of them more than I can. The themes I see are, definitely getting bored easily, traveling around, um, being around many different kinds of people. That would be invigorating for you. That would keep you interested. But again, there's something deep, wild, and dark about your role that you can play. Transformation could be involved, something like that. Think of if you're, I don't know your depth of astrological astuteness, but think of midheaven and Gemini, but also think of Lilith there, and Mercury rules the midheaven, but it's in third house Scorpio. So definitely something with information or short distance travel, but there's this whole dark, deep dark twist on it as well. Maybe that just does have to do with you wanting to be, not controlled and be free. This could make you a bit paranoid or a bit like insecure at times, but it could also make you extremely intuitive, perceptive, and really excellent with uncovering a darker side to things. I'm just going to leave that at that. Hopefully that's kind of helpful in some sort of way. Maybe that'll give you something to think about, for your career. Could just be that you're bored too. Like I said, you could get very bored easily when it comes to your role, your reputation, your career. You may just want to change these things up every now and then. That may not necessarily be a bad thing. Or get a position that's more extreme, more variable, more intense. That level of intensity may be something that you're drawn to. You may find that you're very excellent at dealing with that intensity, that pressure. Okay, lastly, let's talk about the romantic part of the chart. This is something you asked about as well. You're in a very long-term relationship, have been single for 2 years. You're not really over that person. Honestly, I'm not sure. Let me read your question again. That was pretty much it. They had Libra Sun and Venus in Scorpio, so that, would be a good match. I don't recommend dating someone with like too many of your same placements, because it's kind of boring. You're not going to be growing really. But it would be very easy and, very comfortable to just fall back on, especially after a hard day, or if you're experiencing something difficult in life. It'll be really easy, really comfortable to just come back to that person who's got similar placements to you. They understand you. You can relax with them. They get you. You don't have to try too hard. So anyway, someone with, those same placements could be really excellent. You could, I could definitely see why you'd have a long-term relationship with them, or why you may not be over them. But I do just want to remind you as well, again, I would like to see some more variability. I don't know their other placements. Maybe they did have a lot of differences in the rest of their chart. This reading isn't just about that relationship. I could analyze that if you wanted me to, but that's not completely what this is about. But yeah, just going off of that though, I would like to see maybe a little bit more difference. And then that would make the relationship more complementary in nature. Both people would be bringing something different to the table, and that's what would keep it passionate. That's what would keep learning and growth in the relationship for both parties. I would say though, specifically Libra Sun, Venus, Scorpio, both of these placements are kind of debilitated or in detriment. So both of you would be very kind of unique, misunderstood, and so that would make that dynamic especially powerful, because you would come together. Not only you understand each other because you have the same types of dynamics, but also because each of you would be misunderstood by other people, that would make it even more powerful as well. So I could definitely see that, but again, even with all that being said, I would like some more variability maybe. But let's look at your placements here. So okay, so let's start with Mars. Mars isn't like, I wouldn't say it's the backbone of compatibility, but it is definitely relevant. Mars has to do with more sexual attraction. It's who you're attracted to. It's not necessarily who you would best work with in a long-term situation, but it's who you find attractive. And then it also has to do with like your sex drive as well, your sexuality, things like that. For you, Mars, like we talked about earlier, Mars is in Aquarius. So this means that your sexuality may be very like unique, kind of rebellious in some kind of way. Usually when you have placements like this in Aquarius, there's more of a chance of you being, LGBTQ, whatever, being being any of those things, lesbian, gay, bi, trans. Not always, of course, but I do think it's more likely with placements like that, because there's something unique, something different about the way you approach sexuality. There's something kind of offbeat or unique about it. And then likewise, what you're attracted to is uniqueness as well, originality. You are attracted to someone who is different than everyone else. They may have a provocative appearance. They might be very intelligent. They might have, very unique viewpoints on things. Maybe they have controversial viewpoints on things. That would be very interesting, very attractive for you. Okay. And I'm going to kind of just leave it at that. Well, I guess the only other thing would be Aquarius is very detached as well. So that could be attractive for you. This is going to go in a completely different direction after we talk about Mars, though. But when it comes to Mars, that sexual attraction, you're attracted to someone who could be a little bit aloof, a bit detached, more intellectual, more more of that kind of intelligence, the logical intelligence. That's what's very attractive for you. However, the other main points I look to for compatibility are Venus and the descendant. Both of those are in water signs, so those would indicate a lot more true compatibility with water signs, with people who are more emotional. First, let's talk about Venus. So Venus also has a lot to do with attraction and who you're attracted to. Venus is in Scorpio, so that would indicate, being attracted to someone who's a bit emotionally intense. This would also indicate someone who is kind of counterculture. They are unique. They're independent. They are themselves. They're different than other people. They are controversial, or they have deep opinions. That kind of echoes what Mars and Aquarius was saying. The main difference here is that this person is going to be really emotional, really intuitive, generally speaking. Like whoever you're attracted to would be. There's something intense about them, dark, mysterious. They are deep, complex, emotional. These are all Scorpio keywords, and they are what you are attracted to in a person. Okay. But Venus isn't just what you're attracted to, it's also how you approach relationships. So Venus being in Scorpio, I actually did a video on this. Maybe I will link that. Hopefully I remember, or if you're interested, you can ask. But Venus in Scorpio, it's debilitated, it's in detriment, because it's a difficult way of going about things. When you have Venus in Scorpio, when you are attracted to someone, you obsess over them. You feel so strongly, you feel so intensely, you get hooked on them. And I think having that level of attraction and infatuation is inherently difficult, because so much of your own well-being is now dependent on that other person. It's dependent on that person that you're attracted to. So from all of that, there can be a lot of insecurity, and this is what gets Venus and Scorpio the reputation of being controlling, because not all people with this placement end up being controlling. But that is one reaction that we can take when, we feel so vulnerable. So much of our well-being depends on that other person. It may be tempting to try to, physically control them, because we're just trying to take care of ourselves. But because so much of that depends on them, we feel like we have to control them. That's one way of going about it. There's different ways of going about it, though. Sometimes, there's a million different ways you can go about it. Sometimes we might actually leave that person because we feel like, if we leave them first, then they can't leave us. I know I don't think that's what happened with you, but I'm just saying, this placement that you have, Venus and Scorpio, it is very difficult. The way you go about relationships, the way you are attracted to people, may be inherently difficult, and not everyone is going to understand this as well. Whenever you have placements that are in detriment or debilitated, there is some level of being misunderstood, with it. So in this case, not everyone's going to understand how you go about relationships. They're not going to understand how deeply you feel the passion, the obsession, even, other people just won't understand that, and that's what makes it even more difficult as well. So, being attracted to someone deep, complex, emotional, someone like Scorpio, someone who may have Scorpio placements, like, your past relationship had Venus in Scorpio, that's definitely not surprising. Someone who has Scorpio placements will not only are they going to be what you're attracted to, you're going to be attracted to them, but also they will understand your approach to relationships. They will be emotionally, very deep and complex. So they'll understand when you are very deeply emotional with your attraction to them. They'll get that, because on some level they are those things too. So that's one way of going about this. Someone with Scorpio placements, you could have really great compatibility with them. You also have Mercury in Scorpio, so you could communicate very effectively, very easily with someone who has Scorpio placements, generally speaking. And also, you do have Capricorn moon as well. That is a bit different. Excuse me. That is a bit different than Scorpio. You probably won't be as generally emotionally intense as someone who has like sun or moon in Scorpio, for example. But you will relate in the sense that, you are very private, you're very guarded. Someone who has major Scorpio placements is going to be kind of private and guarded too. So you can understand that, between each other. And for you, you really want that loyalty, you want commitment. Someone with Scorpio placements is going to want those things too. And both of you will be generally pretty consistent, not only romantically, but also just in the rest of your lives, because, your placements, you just would be consistent. Capricorn moon, sun in Libra, you're not going to change anything dramatic in your life without putting a lot of thought into it. And it's probably going to be kind of gradual. That's what I said at the beginning of the reading, that you're gradual with how you change things. So someone with Scorpio placements is going to be really reassured by your stability and consistency. They are going to feel like they can trust you, and that's really key for Scorpio. So Scorpio, I could definitely see working out. Someone with placements in Scorpio. I'm going to come back to your relationship in a sec. But one other placement that I look to is the descendant. Descendant is in Pisces, and that is kind of who you best work with on a one-on-one level. Best in a partnership. So Pisces, so that would indicate someone who's definitely more emotional than you are, someone who wears their heart on their sleeves, someone very like spiritual. You have Jupiter in the 7th house as well, so someone who is optimistic, cheerful, kind of like Pisces. Pisces can be very silly, definitely like very wet, in the sense that, you can be more dry at times. If dry is kind of emotionless or cold, wet would be like silly, emotional. I'm picturing this one actress. I don't know her name, but yeah, that's more who you'd be attracted to. Someone who kind of wears their heart on their sleeves. That could be really great for, you are, like we talked about, you can be a little bit more guarded, a little bit more, keeping your cards close to your chest. But when you're around someone who wears their heart on their sleeves, who's more silly, more emotional, more transparent, I think that can kind of, allow you to put your guard down and kind of allow you to open up more easily when it's done in the right way. So Pisces, basically what I'm saying, Pisces is a huge sign of compatibility. Wherever your descendant is, that's always a major sign of compatibility. That's that black triangle on the right side of the chart. So definitely Pisces. Scorpio too, like I said though, either one would work. They do have a lot in common with each other. Both are very emotional, sensitive, perceptive, intuitive. They might understand you when it comes to your unique opinions, your seeing like this deep ideas and metaphysics, things like that. Scorpio or Pisces are often open to occult information and metaphysics, things like that. So they could be very compatible with you. Cancer, maybe to a lesser extent. Cancer isn't always as like, they're not interested in like that kind of deep perception or occult information. They're not typically as interested in that kind of stuff compared to Pisces or Scorpio. But Cancer is similar in the sense that they are a water sign too. They are emotionally deep. They wear their heart on their sleeves, kind of like Pisces. So that could be, well, they can wear their heart on their sleeves. Other times they can be kind of like deep and mysterious. They can have a shell like Scorpio. But either way, Cancer could be interesting too. It doesn't stand out to me as much as Pisces or Scorpio though. And let's briefly go through the elements. I'm actually running out of time, and then I'll come back to your question. So air signs, we did say, you have that kind of like sexual attraction with Aquarius, maybe physical attraction, maybe like sexual compatibility as well. Your sun is in Libra, so you could relate to those people, Libras well. You could relate to air signs well in general. Air signs are going to be detached, quirky, intellectual, intelligent, like book smart, intelligent more so. They're going to be interested in people. They're going to be very flexible, changeable. That in general, yes, you may be attracted to that and you could be friends with them since you have your sun there. But more than that, though, I don't see so much going on there. I think air could be part of someone's chart that you may be involved with, but it's not going to be the dominant thing there. Someone who only has placements in Libra, Gemini, or Aquarius. Like I said, there could be attraction there. You may be friends with them as well, but when it comes to deep romantic potential, I really don't see that working out as much. Kind of same thing with earth signs. You have your Virgo rising, moon in Capricorn, so there's this potential for this really deep understanding with earth signs. They are practical, down to earth, steady, stable, consistent, responsible. You are these things as well to some extent. You have Virgo rising and Capricorn moon, so you're going to relate really well. You can be very good friends. You can understand each other on a deep level. But again, there's no opposites attract here. It's like putting two negative magnets together. They actually repel. There's nothing to draw them into each other. I could see you being really great friends, and maybe that could be part of a different dynamic if there's other things going on in this person's chart. But if it's just earth, I just see it being a friendship. It's going to be stable. It's going to be kind of monotonous, which could be good in some areas, but it's going to lack that kind of passion that I would like to see from a romantic relationship. And then lastly would be the fire signs, Leo, Sagittarius, or Aries. I would say you have the least kind of action going on in the fire signs compared to anything else. Saturn and Uranus are two relatively outer planets that are in Sagittarius, and then you've got your North Node in Aries. But other than that, there's not much going on. So Aries in particular could help you expand, help you grow. I don't think that's always the best energy for a relationship, though, because it puts a stress on the relationship. I think it can be kind of challenging sometimes. It can be good to grow and evolve, but do we really want that in our romantic relationship all the time? I think that can be difficult. And then in general, there's just this lack of fire planets. So someone who's really fiery, outgoing, independent, assertive, that could be captivating for you in the sense that this is very different than how you are. It's kind of exotic in some kind of way. It's interesting. But it's so different from you that although you may be attracted to it on some level, it's going to be really difficult to have, especially a close, intimate relationship in the long term, because they're just so different than you are. You're different from each other. You have different needs, different ways of going about things. Again, I think you want someone you can really trust and, build a steady foundation on. And fire, they are very unstable. They're all over the place. So I just don't see much mutual attraction going on there. They might find you boring. You might find them reckless. Okay, let's just put it that way. So that brings me back to your question. It's been 2 years. Honestly, I'm not really sure how to answer. Usually I feel like looking at the chart, I usually just know how to answer. It's been 2 years single. You're not really over it. If you want, you could give me more information maybe. But I do think it's interesting you have both these two major situations in your life that both took up about the same amount of time. And it's like you want to be done with both, but you're not done with both. So maybe this isn't going to really have so much to do with your astrology, but maybe think about what are you gaining from these things? Even if you're not involved with that relationship anymore, you're still involved with it in the sense that you say you're not over it. So what are you gaining from it? What is keeping you from letting go of either of these or both of these? Even if all you have from this relationship is just this like attachment to it, maybe this is kind of a dumb question, but like, what is keeping you of letting go from those things? Maybe there's still something you need to learn, something that's still benefiting you. And like I said, I'm aware that this relationship is over, but maybe there's something that's still benefiting you, even if it's just in your mind, by not getting over that. You know, what's in it for you? Why aren't you over these things? You know, maybe there's still something to learn, some kind of lesson, something to process there. But then again, maybe that's kind of what you're asking me, and I'm not really sure. Like I said, I will say someone who has Libra Sun, Venus, Scorpio, I can see that you'd be mutually attracted to each other. I think, you know, it could be very steady, very stable. There would be that mutual attraction. But at the same time, you know, you'd have a lot in common. So that could be very captivating. But again, I think, you know, branch out a little bit more. Why not, you know, have more of an adventure like your Saturn in Sagittarius would suggest. Try something new, try something different. Maybe that's what this is actually about, is Saturn. You're afraid of the unknown, you're afraid of adventure. You know, just go out in a completely different world that you've never experienced before. That might be totally scary for you, but it might be really rewarding. If you need a little hint at where to go, well, I already talked about your career, but when it comes to your relationship, maybe try someone with Pisces placements. Of course, use your own discernment. I wouldn't say like, oh, anyone with these placements is going to work for you. Obviously, you know, we have to make sure that they're stable. You know, there's always the red flags you can look for. But yeah, astrologically, Pisces looks like it would be similar enough. You would have some things in common, but they're gonna be kind of a different world for you. They might be. It's kind of like opposites attract. They will be opposite to you in many ways, but that could be very tantalizing. Other than that, you know, I don't know why you're still. I don't know what's keeping you from being over these two parts of your life, but maybe just accept it. You know, it's not accept where you're at. Accept that, you know, you are still attached to both of these things for some reason. I know that for sure. So it may sound contrary, but I think sometimes we have to accept where we're at in order to grow or change. So in order to move on from your job or from your relationship, first just accept that you are still hooked on these, especially the relationship. You're still hooked on that for some reason. That's okay. Accept that within yourself. Maybe you've been trying to avoid it or trying to move on, and you know, they say what you resist persists. I know it sounds backward, but maybe that is actually what is part of what's keeping you hooked on the relationship, is, you know, trying to avoid it. Just accept that this was something clearly very special to you, something that you were attached to. And we talked earlier about how you can be kind of codependent, you know, as well. You can be fixated on like giving your entire being to someone. Maybe that part of the reading will be helpful. Ultimately, I'm not sure, but I don't want to rant and ramble too much. So let me know if any of that helped you. And if it didn't, let's continue this conversation. Maybe you could give me more information or give me a hint on like where, try to steer me a little bit in the right direction. And then maybe I can, you know, take a different approach to helping you answer those questions. So that's my take on this reading. This has gotten too long. I think I have said everything I want to say. So I really, truly hope this helps you, or at least was very interesting or confirmed a few things. And yeah, let me know where to go from here. Yeah, and then anyone else watching this, again, you know, the link to my website should be on the screen now. So check that out if you want a reading. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Have a great day.